Hello, and welcome to the Ultimate Strategy Podcast, your go-to podcast for everything strategy. Each week, we are going to be sharing a new episode covering a wide range of topics designed to help your business not only grow smarter, but also make strategy much more approachable and actionable. I'm Devina, Strategy Execution Director at Cascade.
And I'm Laura Blackmore, Head of Strategy Execution. Hello and welcome. We are excited to have you with us today. And don't forget to stay tuned for weekly episodes and check out the other content we have also recorded. There's some great nuggets of strategy tips in there. But before we dive in, let me thank today's sponsor, Cascade. Cascade is the #1 strategy execution platform that helps turn your visions into reality by working as the strategic brain of your organization. Thousands of businesses around the world use Cascade to plan, execute, and track their strategies in one place, improving efficiency and speeding up decision-making. By successfully executing strategies, Cascade customers are making a huge difference, from deploying life-saving vaccines to engineering the fastest Formula One car. And if you want to get your team moving towards your vision in one central platform, check us out at our website, www.cascade.app. Now, let's get started. Today, we are talking about the 5 elements of successful strategy execution. We are going to be breaking down visibility, focus, alignment, accountability, and speed, what they mean, why they matter, and how you can apply them in your organization. First up, let's talk about visibility. And I'm excited about this topic, Devina, because, if you imagine driving a car at night with no headlights, it's a recipe for disaster. And similarly, in strategy execution, visibility is about shedding light on your goals, your progress, and your challenges. And here's why it's vital. If team members can't see how their work contributes to the big picture, then confusion and inefficiency creeps in. Visibility ensures that everyone from executives to frontline employees understand how their efforts connect to the strategy.
Absolutely. And I'm super excited to get into this topic today. And I think about companies like Salesforce, Laura. They really use dashboards and reporting to display live and direct metrics on a lot of their strategic initiatives. And that could be anything from sales targets to customer retention stats. Every single individual in the organization has access to that data. And that really creates this sense of transparency. And that leads to greater trust and drives a lot of action. And for me as well, it starts to really reinforce this culture of strategy as well. So I definitely think it's an important one for businesses to acknowledge that they need to improve. And I don't think you can ever be too visible as well, which I think is the great part. But maybe you have some tips to give our listeners as well when they think about visibility.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think it kind of feels like the easiest of the 5, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think it's something that you can, I see it as like picking the low-hanging fruit. I see it as something that you can really get to very easily. And I think one of the ways that you can do that is, of course, investing in tools that centralize data, which I feel like is a priority for a lot of organizations, but not just getting lots of tools to display visualization, but also thinking about how you might manage or execute strategy. So tools like strategy management software, project management dashboards, the goal is to be able to help people visibly make progress and visibly be able to see the bottlenecks and easily spot and make decisions about those things. So I think for me, it would be investing into the right tools, good tools, but also bringing that much needed visibility to everybody, not just the exec team. I think sometimes people feel like, well, the exec team need visibility. No, actually everybody needs visibility into how their work's contributing, how their decisions are making an impact, what that's having on the bottom line, how it's manifesting in those metrics, either good or bad. So I think that would be my #1 tip. But let's talk about focus, because it's very relatable to visibility, I think, in a lot of ways.
I think focus is another great one too, right? When we think about the successful elements of strategy execution, there's this saying that goes, you can do anything, but not everything. And I think that's particularly true in strategy execution. You can't do it all. Strategy also ultimately boils down to human beings who are executing. And human beings, we have limited capacity, especially when we think about a quality result and output. So focus means prioritizing fewer things, but those few things need to drive the most impact. And I think what happens a lot of the time, Laura, is too many organizations spread themselves quite thin, individuals spread themselves quite thin, and chase too many of those strategic initiatives at once. And this really dilutes the resources and energy. And what you might end up with, instead of something that is amazing and incredible, it's actually quite mediocre, and might even be taking away from investing the time in those fantastic projects. So I think you really have to make sure that your focus is in the right place as well at the right time. I think about Apple and Steve Jobs and his return in the 90s. And he came back to the organization, and one of I guess his key strategies was, right, we need to do less. We have a crazy amount of product lines, ranges. The pipeline of new NPD and new product development was also huge. And his strategy was, let's just come out with some less products, but make them absolutely kick ass. And I think this strategy from the top really meant that actually Apple could focus on becoming the leader in those particular product ranges, which we have now seen come to light, right? When we think about the iMac, what has now transpired into the MacBook that we see, the iPod that then transpired into the iPhone, they really became trailblazers. And of course, since then, they've done incredible cool things like their virtual reality headset. They've created the speaker. They have continued to expand, but they prioritized first. They became the leaders in some of these product ranges first. And that's a great example of choosing to focus on less, which ultimately ends up being more as well.
I like that. And I would love to see the iPod make a comeback, by the way. I don't know about you, when you're on a long journey and your phone is dying because of all like the music podcasts you're listening to. I just really want the iPod to make a comeback.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. And no distractions too, right? Like you can't do anything else apart from listen to music. So you wouldn't get sucked into emails or social media.
I would love that. I think about that often, actually. And I think a big tip for me when it comes to focus, and this is something I've really seen organizations leaning into, actually, is that regularly revisiting your strategy. And I think this is why I felt like it was very closely linked to visibility, because I think once you start looking at things, then you start to drive the focus, and when it's in front of you, you can revisit it. And so I think, finding those moments, and for a lot of organizations, it's quarterly. It might be less or more for your organization, depending on the speed and how the market shifts and, how big your organization is, etc. But using those moments to really look at the strategy and ensure that you're focusing on the right things, ensure that those external factors and the risks and the challenges and the market, innovation, technology, the people, the resourcing, all of that, is that actually, are you actually still focusing on the right things? Are you trying to do too much? That's a question you need to ask yourself. For some organizations, setting the plan at the beginning of the year, there's so much that you can go and do, but you have to be realistic with yourself. If you try and do all of these things, like you said, you're not going to do them that well. So what can you do that's really going to move the needle for the organization? And are those things or those priorities aligned with the longer term objectives? Is it going to help you to get closer to that vision? And sometimes saying no is the most strategic move. Pushing that back by another quarter or by another year so that you can focus on another product line, focus on that iPhone development, focus on the MacBook, whatever that might be, that can actually bring you closer to your goals. So saying no more and not just saying yes, I think helps you on your way to drive focus. And it's a difficult task. It's not easy.
Yeah, that's such a great piece of advice, and probably one on the human side of things, right? Doing less is always more. I love that. Maybe now let's move on to alignment, our third element. Now, alignment, what does that mean? Well, when we think about that practice, it really means that we're ensuring every single team member and individual in your organization is rowing in the same direction. Your ship is all heading in the same way. Somebody's not trying to go left and somebody else isn't trying to go right. Misalignment really leads to wasted resources, and it creates a lot of tension. It creates frustration. It creates resentment in your organization. And alignment truly bridges that gap between strategy creation or design to coming up with that great idea and plan, and then executing, right? Getting it done. And you want to make sure that each department and each of your team's goals are synchronized. They support the overall strategy when we think about your corporate level goals. Now, without that alignment, what you're going to see is quite siloed efforts. And that doesn't help anyone. In fact, what you might find is that teams start to compete each other. It kind of feels like you against me as opposed to us together against the world. And what you really want to make sure is that teams are truly complementing each other. And maybe, Laura, I know you've mentioned Amazon before, but that's definitely an example that we see as excelling alignment, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I think Amazon is a really clear example, right from their leadership principles that are embedded through everything they do, right from hiring to making decisions to how they run meetings. Everybody knows the priorities and works towards those same customer-obsessed goals. I think, the vision is very, very clear. The priorities are very clear. And if you think about how that leads to what we've talked about so far, their strategy is visible. I know from doing tours of their production sites, their vision and their objectives are plastered all over the walls. Like everybody, right from the seasonal workers to the temporary staff to management can see that visibility, and that, there's an incredible amount of focus. It's not too many. It's the right amount of goals for them. So it's focused as well. And then that in turn leads to that clear alignment that everybody knows what they're working towards. And I think one big tip that I would have on this is that communicating well and clearly is the cornerstone of alignment. You've got these, or for some businesses, they don't do this, but I would really strive and recommend that your organization does this for anybody listening. And that's hold regular check-ins where teams can share progress and challenges. People love to share the wins, but they also love to share the challenges because that's ultimately what makes you grow, and also helps you to focus and to prioritize. So using tools like roadmaps or strategy maps and any ways that you can visualize how goals connect across departments and how teams are cross-functionally working will also give you those wins as well. So I think that would be my tip. There's a little bit of two-prong there. You've got that clear communication, which is done through that visibility and focus and bringing clarity to the organization. But then you've also got how do you keep that up through regular involvement from the organization as well.
I love that. I know Laura and I love a good whiteboarding session. So we do love visualizing things a lot. So we definitely recommend that too. Great. So our fourth pillar is accountability. Now, a plan without accountability, it's just wishful thinking, right? We must assign ownership and ensure follow through. There's also an element of human psychology here. When my name is attached to something, I actually create this emotional connection with it. It begins to really drive my effort. So making sure that we have that within our strategic plan is important, right, Laura?
I would say so. And I think it's kind of funny. The accountability is ultimately what drives action. And I use this example quite a lot, but I think it's so easy for people to understand. And that's last year, I actually got myself a coach, and I call her my accountability coach. She's a fitness and health coach, but I call her my accountability coach because for the last year or year and a bit, I have got incredible results in my personal life. And purely the only way that I contribute success to that is that I had somebody holding me accountable. I had somebody, I knew what I was responsible for, but I wasn't really motivated or disciplined to stay committed on that. And it's the same with strategy. When people know what they're responsible for, when they're clear on the deliverables and the specific outcomes they're striving for, they're more likely to stay committed. And then you've got that, person or people holding them accountable. That's where I never felt like I stalled and I didn't feel like my progress slowed down. And it's the same with strategy. If you don't have accountability, if people don't know when they're doing the check-in, monthly or quarterly, and what they've got to check in with because the goals weren't really clear and there's nowhere where it's visible, well, those strategies are going to stall and progress is going to slow down. And I've seen this work really well in Google. Google use OKRs, which is not my favorite strategy methodology, but it works for them. They're a fast-moving tech business. And the OKRs are used to assign clear roles and responsibilities. It holds people accountable. And every single objective has a designated owner. And those results are reviewed regularly. I think I've heard before that they do this maybe every 2 weeks and 2-week sprints, but it could even be weekly at an organization like Google. And that keeps everybody motivated, disciplined, and on track. What else would you say, Devina, from creating a culture of accountability, do you think?
Great example. Yeah. And I think it's actually, it starts with setting clear expectations, right? Making sure these individuals understand what they need to be doing and what is their expected output. I think using tools like progress trackers, activity task management trackers is really helpful. But then also regular performance reviews. I know for me personally, a performance review really helps me to reset, right? Learn what worked in my previous quarter or 6 months and learn what didn't and adapt it. I think those check-ins help me to pivot. Whereas if you go a long time without having that sense of accountability or those check-ins, well, if, for example, if we had a performance review on an annual basis, well, a whole year just went by and I wasn't able to pivot and change the things that I needed to. So regular kind of check-ins and that accountability and setting those clear expectations, having the tracking, that is really what we want. And the other thing that I would urge listeners to avoid is the blame game, right? We don't want to sit here and point out where somebody hasn't necessarily, kind of done the part that they needed to do. Let's understand why. Let's understand what we can learn and then make sure that we ensure success next time as well.
I love that. Well, let's end on speed. So I think in today's fast-paced world, which we've talked about a little bit, slow execution can mean missed opportunities. And I think speed for us is about acting quickly whilst also maintaining quality. So I think when people think of speed, they sometimes mean rushing it, but we don't mean that. It means reducing delays to what you're delivering. It's about empowering teams to make decisions without excessive bureaucracy. And I think if we think about a real life example, and another major brand here would be Tesla, they are a master of speed from initial concept to production. They innovate faster than most of their competitors, if not all. And their agile approach really allows them to iterate quickly and stay ahead in a competitive market. So I don't know, I think the tip here, and this is a difficult one and it depends on what your organization is like, but adopt as many agile practices as you can throughout your organization and start somewhere small. Maybe it's that sprint or iterative planning approach that you might put in, or maybe it's about empowering teams to make decisions without waiting for levels of approval or layers of approval. But obviously that's difficult to do in some organizations that might have worked that way for a long time. But this is going to help you to execute faster and learn and adapt faster as well. Devina, why don't you take us through a little conclusion of what we talked about today while we wrap up?
Of course. So let's recap on the 5 pillars of successful strategy execution, right? We've got visibility up first. That is really making sure that you give your team what they need and the clarity that they need to then go on and execute. Number 2, focus. That means that you're working on the things that matter the most, right? You're actually doing the work that has the highest impact. Third, we have alignment. Everyone's moving in the same direction. We are all rowing towards the same destination. Fourth, accountability. That means that we have complete ownership and that drives follow through amongst us. And finally, speed. That keeps you competitive in a fast changing world. And I also think that is an organic output of the previous 4 as well. So remember that strategy execution isn't just a one-time event. It's a continuous process. And to get something different, you have to do something different. So by mastering these 5 elements, you can really turn your vision into a reality.
Thank you, Devina. And if you found this episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your team. Share it with everyone you know. Let's keep the conversation going. What challenges do you face in executing strategy? Reach out to us in the comments or connect with us on LinkedIn and tell us there what else you want to hear about in our next episodes.
Absolutely. And make sure to tune in next week where we'll be talking about another exciting episode. It's going to be a great show with practical tips that you don't want to miss.
And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the Ultimate Strategy Podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Check out the link to our website that we mentioned at the beginning. And a huge thank you, as always, to our sponsor, Cascade, for making this podcast possible.
Thanks for listening. And remember that great strategies are only as good as their execution.
So take action, make it happen, and see the results. See you in the next episode of your weekly dose of strategy.